I recently went thrift shopping for some books and found some that have potential to be upcycled into journals or sketchbooks. Starting with this one, a frozen drinks recipe book that I got for 99 cents. I think this was made in the early 2000s, it's still in pretty good condition, but the thing that caught my eye was the really nice hardcovers inside of the dust jacket. There seems to be no damage, and I really like this burnt orange color. A blank canvas calling out for me to paint on it. The spine was also in good condition, I'm just not sure what kind of binding I should do with it. The inside pages are very simple, printed with 2 colors on a cream paper, and I think because they're not coated, I could use these for paper making in the future. I did look this up online and I found some reviews, and turns out it's kind of poorly rated. It doesn't have very good recipes according to the reviews. So I don't think this is a very rare, valuable book I'm destroying, and this made me feel better about totally gutting the book. I think it would be fun to let the recipes inspire the new theme of this book. This frozen raspberry lemonade spoke to me, and I feel like it would be a good pattern on the cover. To remove the text block, I first tried cutting through the hinge area where the end page is. I do this very carefully because it's easy to cut right through the spine, and that's fine if I want to remove the covers, but I actually want to keep the spine intact, so I'm doing this very carefully. It was kind of difficult to cut through the hard glue below the paper. This book was actually bound very well, so I ended up tearing off the pages, and I found that way easier. Then the hard glue from the spine was left over, and I could just rip that off while still keeping the spine of the cover intact. And I thought the end bands were still nice and I didn't want to throw those out, so I'm going to use those in the new binding. For this new cover design, I want to cover this area, and I figured why not use the heavy paper from the end page of the original book. I trimmed that to be 2.5 inches wide. Then I glued the end bands to the inside cover with PVA. Also glued down any paper that was sticking up from the old end pages. Then brushed on PVA to that paper I cut and glued it down the center of the spine. And I used the rounded end of an awl to press it down even further. Since the spine is already curved in, I have seen some other bookbinders use sandbags to make the glue adhere better. I don't have those, so I tried to do this with a cloth and put a heavy weight on top of it. I think the paper dried pretty well, even though it's not completely smooth underneath, but the pages will cover that anyway. Now I'm ready to paint my covers. Again, I'm using that frozen raspberry lemonade theme as inspiration, and doing this with acrylic paint. Most of this is patio paint, which is self-sealing and more durable, so I think it should be okay on the outside of a cover. These square brush strokes are my interpretation of ice cubes, and then I'm going to paint lemons, raspberries, maybe some leaves on top, and I'm just going to let you watch the time lapse of painting, so enjoy. I like this pattern so much, I put it up in my paper shop. I'll link that down below. You can also find my other patterns on your choice of paper in this shop as well. Now that the paint is dry and the cover is pretty much complete, it's time to figure out the pages. I want to do some kind of single section binding. I also have some cream color paper that pretty much matches the original, and I think this goes well together. So I trimmed 10 sheets of that, evenly stacked them together, and folded the whole group in half. This is a pretty thick one signature, so I'm flattening it even more in my DIY book press. For the binding holes, I'm using my binding guide, spacing out the holes about 1.5 inch apart, and punching through with an awl. And using this group of pages as a guide to measure out where to punch the holes on the cover. I could also use an awl for this, but I chose to use my Japanese screw punch because it makes cleaner holes. I was worried that it might not punch all the way through the spine, but luckily it did, and it actually looks better than I thought it would. Now for the binding, I'm using red thread, which matches the raspberries. To estimate the thread, I'm stringing it along the height of the spine 2 times. This style doesn't take very much thread at all, and I'm waxing it with some beeswax. This will help protect it from fraying since it's on the outside of the book. I'm single threading it with a straight binding needle. And to make the binding process easier, I'm clipping the cover and pages together flat open. Doing this with some paper and a binding clip. The style of binding I'm doing is called the Hitch, and it creates a hitching pattern with the thread on the outside of the book. It's a little hard to see on this patterned cover, so if you want to learn how to do this method, I have a whole other tutorial going through each step. It's much easier to learn from. This tutorial also takes you through 7 other stitching patterns for single section binding. These are some of my favorite stitches to bind with because they're so simple to do, and I'll link that video down below. Now the stitching is all complete. I'm going to trim off this extra paper that's hanging out on the edge of the book. If I had a more heavy-duty trimmer or a guillotine, I would use that, but since I don't, I put a cutting mat underneath the whole group of pages and trimmed slowly with a craft knife to make a smooth edge. I then put some weight on top of the book to flatten it even more and hopefully relax the pages. I wasn't sure how this book would turn out, but I'm pleasantly surprised at how it did. The binding helps the book open flat for journaling or sketching. And I like the extra decorative element of the original end bands. And I think the slim spine on this original book made it work well with single section binding. Here's a before and after. Let me know in the comments what you would have done to this book. It was fun to give this book a new life, and it might be more enjoyed as a sketchbook or journal rather than a recipe book that nobody really wanted. Upcycling and making over books is something I want to do more of this year, so if you don't want to miss any of those videos, make sure you hit that bell that's next to the subscribe button so you can sign up for post notifications and then you won't miss any of my videos. Big thanks to my patrons and members. You guys help this channel continue, so thank you. If you're interested in supporting, I'll put those links down below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!